I thought I'd just do a little bit about SACE flexibilities, because one of the, I suspect as you work with schools, one of the things you will commonly hear is, but you can't, but in the SACE you can't, but in the SACE you can't. There's a heck of a lot of myth busting that needs to happen from that perspective, that there's often, and you hear students say, but my teacher said I have to do it this way. Actually, no, there's this way or this way or this way. So I just want to give you a sense of the flavour of SACE flexibility, not a deep understanding, but at least to start to arm you with an understanding that there are options and choices and flexibilities that can be made to accommodate the range of students. So I think it's that notion, and certainly our CE talks about it, is the subjects, which is what we always get caught up about, are actually kind of the outside bit. They're not actually at the heart of the SACE. What's at the heart of the SACE is preparing our young people for work, life and further learning. So it's that sort of flavour, and that's about developing them as capable young citizens. And I've got to say, our notion is, if that's what the SACE is supposed to do, to prepare students for further work, learning and community life, if a student doesn't have a SACE, does that mean they're therefore not prepared for further work, learning and community life? So we're pretty passionate about the fact that we think that there's a whole range of learning that can be captured in the SACE. So it's not about saying, but there's other pathways, there's VET, there's this, there's that. All of those things can be done as part of a SACE rather than instead of a SACE. So we're very much advocates for not an either or, but a both and, that there's lots of different journeys students can have. Thank you. And really sitting at, and so we were after flexibility, but we're after quality. It's not, and it was lovely to hear that. It's not about dumbing down for students being flexible. It's just about valuing other ways of learning or of demonstrating learning, rather than saying that students don't need, that some of these students are going to be sidelined and don't need to learn these things. When I've taught in my career, I've taught in lots of different contexts, 4 different states. But also in some very remote contexts, in urban Indigenous contexts, in new arrival program contexts, those sorts of things. And I guess I've got a very personal and moral aversion to that notion. I've taught high SES, low SES, of that idea that somehow students' birthrights determine their opportunities in education. We should be the great leveller. So that's my personal passion, I guess. The bedrock of flexibility in the SACE comes from flexible thinking, and it's often the hardest bit to get. The flexibilities are there, but if you don't get that flexible thinking going in schools, in teachers, and also in students to a degree, to understand that they've got choice and they've got agency here, then you can end up in a place where it all seems very fixed and rigid, and here's the rules and everyone's got to play by the rules. There are rules there, there are standards that are there, but there's lots of ways of getting there as well. In particular, the areas of flexibility, I guess, that I want to highlight are in programming. So the kinds of SACE that students have, the subjects that are, and the way the subjects are put together, and then the assessment side, which again feeds beautifully from what was just being discussed before. I'm just going tick, tick, tick. When I listened to that science teacher talk about the student who wanted to, the student she'd been working with, and he was also going to do an oral presentation because he could show his learning better in that way. And I'm going, yes, yes, that's fabulous. And I guess there's a really simple logic that sits underneath all this, that that when you are flexible in the way that you deliver and you differentiate and you cater for individual learning needs and pathways, you get better SACE completion, and everyone's a winner in that space. I mean, certainly are in terms of the outcomes you'd be looking for. We certainly are as an agency, but most importantly, the students are, the community of South Australia is. The money spent on students who don't successfully complete education, as we all know, far exceeds the cost of educating them in the first place. Thank you. So flexible thinking, what are we talking about? We're talking about encouraging new ideas, and in fact trying to develop a bias for new ideas, to actually want to seek out new ideas, not just be receptive to, but actually that to become a way that we operate as professionals. Certainly new ways of recognising student learning, and we're trying to grapple with some of those in the modernisation, and we've got and it's all fine for us to put into a curriculum. Students can do things in certain ways, but we know that prescribed curriculum is not received curriculum by students. And the other challenge we'll have is that even if that students receive the curriculum in alternate ways, we then have to work with markers and moderators so that they see the evidence in different ways as well. So it's all of that kind of piece in there. Knowing students, so that real personalisation of the curriculum and multiple pathways, but the same outcome, which is getting it to a certificate. Thank you. You're very good. I like this. Oh, this is very good. Maybe chair. But also flexibility in programming. You know, there's often notions that the SACE is year 11 and year 12. Well, that's 2 years. Well, it doesn't have to be 2 years. SACE can be completed over well and truly more than 2 years. You know, one of the things you hear students say, and we'll get calls from this, oh, you've only got, you know, there's a limit, you can only do 3 years as the maximum for the SACE. No, you can complete it over a lifetime. It doesn't go away. You can come back at any point and finish your SACE. That your ATAR only lasts 2 years or 3 years. No, your ATAR stays as it was when you got your ATAR until you do something else with your SACE and add to your ATAR. The only preclusion of that is that there's a few courses like medicine where they won't take an ATAR older than a certain amount, but it's not that the ATAR goes off. But this is the kind of myth stuff that happens in schools and that students come with. So look, if I can't finish in 2 years or 3 years, what's the point? Well, there's a lot of points still. So students can start stage 1 before year 11. They can finish, you know, stage 2 well and truly beyond being in year 12. They can in fact have left school and come into us with evidence of VET, or if their old school's willing, go back to their old school who can pass that information through to us and still complete their SACE. There's lots of those options. And some schools are very creative about picking that up, and they, I guess, really take on that moral obligation that it's our student and we want to see that student through to completion whenever that happens. I particularly see that in country schools. They'll often follow the students, I mean, literally down to the baker's shop, you know, wherever that kid happens to be working, to say, hey, I can see you doing that. You know what? You don't even have to come in. We can work with you while you are here and do things to finish you off. So, well, that sounds like kill them, doesn't it? Not that sort of finish you off, complete your SACE. Sorry, that sounded very bad. A 10 credit subject is a semester length subject, but it doesn't have to be done in a semester. It can be done over a year. It can actually be done over even more than a year if you wanted to do it that way for students. So for some students, meeting their literacy or their numeracy requirement, they're going to need longer to be able to do that. So they might do, you know, 1 year, stage 1 literacy subject while they're in year 11 for the full year. So a 10 credit, a semester subject for the year. The next semester, next year, while they're also doing some other stage 2 subjects, they can mix it up. They can do stage 2 subjects before they've finished all their stage 1. It doesn't, the order is not important. In the end, it's, you know, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, and once you get the jigsaw or a bingo, you know, yep, okay, you've got it. You've got all the pieces that you need here. Schools can deliver programs in class, obviously, but off campus, online, part-time, through clusters and community partnerships, RTOs, lots of different methods of delivery. And you know, encouraging schools to explore those is really useful. Thank you. So when we talk about flexible subjects, I guess there's 2 categories here of flexibility in subjects. There are some subjects that by their nature are fairly flexible. They tend to have a strong focus on the development of the capabilities. But there's not sort of discipline-specific content in the subjects. It's more a focus through capabilities and on learning processes. So the sort of subjects that I'm talking about are things like the personal learning plan and the research project that are really valuing, you know, planning and research, obviously, but also integrated learning, which is about development of capabilities, workplace practices, which is about that kind of workplace learning, community studies, so about learning in and with the community, where process is really what's being assessed more than do I know my biology or my English or whatever. So, in terms of flexible assessment, I mean, this is the part, it's funny that people think there's the least flexibility, and in lots of ways I think it's got the most flexibility. I mean, firstly, teachers can design programs that suit their cohort, so that they can be cohort and context and context resource specific, and take advantage of the opportunities in their own schools and communities, but suit their learners' pathways, etc. But having done that, once a program, sometimes teachers think that they've had, you've probably heard the term LAP, Learning and Assessment Plan, approved by us. I'd argue very strongly that doesn't even belong in our remit. It's, those things should be dynamic and flexible, and that as opportunities arise, as students' needs change, they should be changed. And they can be, but teachers need to be comfortable in doing that. And the only risk or thing there is that they still need to ultimately assess, according to kind of the specifications. So the number of tasks overall, or they've got if they have to do two different types of assessment, they've got some representation in both of those. There's some general things they have to do, but there's a lot of flexibility within that. The number of tasks is often flexible, and it's interesting actually, as we're doing some subject renewal, I'm starting to see us start to move to not only less tasks, but also fixing the number of tasks, because we've given a range for some time to be flexible, 4 to 6, or for example, English was 4 to 5 tasks, or might have even been 4 to 6. And what we found is that so many people go for 6 tasks. And it's first, I've got a daughter in Year 12 at the moment, so I'm living the Year 12 experience and the SACE experience at home. And we've had 2 really interesting conversations in the last week. One where she's down to her exam, she's got her exam for English and 1 task left to go. And she said, "Mum, I've got 2 tasks left to go. I've done 10, which is outrageous, but I've done 10 for the year." And her teachers in that subject are not over-assessing, so that's our issue. She said, "But I've actually only done 50% of the work. I've still got 50% to come." She said, "How can I be this far through the year, have done that many things, and have only done 50% of the work?" And she's right. And then another subject where she was just tearing her hair out with, "I can't cope with all the work," all that sort of conversation. I'm rubbing her back, "Come on, one thing at a time, you'll be all right." And then she was looking at the task, and I said, "Well, how many do you actually have to do for the subject?" And we looked up at this particular subject, and there was choice and flexibility, and the teacher had gone for the maximum. And she, without any being turned to me, she said, "Doesn't my teacher get that if I did 4 tasks instead of 6, that I'd have more time to spend on each of those 4 tasks and I would do better work in them? Why does she give me more?" And I said, "Well, I think your teacher's answer would be that then you might, if you don't do so well in one of them, we can replace one." She said, "But I'm not going to be able to do as well because I haven't got as much time to do it." And so it's, that kind of chicken and egg stuff. So teachers will go, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I always find the students don't do so well in one. Well, maybe it's because they've got too many to do. And the other thing that I think happens as teachers is that we always see it through especially secondary teachers, my subject. So, the workload in my subject is reasonable, but the workload when you put all the subjects together for that individual student is not. I think it's, what did Neil calculate, Elaine? It's 40 tasks and assignments, isn't it, in 30 weeks? Is that right? He said, plus, I reckon he says 40 tasks, on average, a SACE student would do 40 tasks and assignments in 30 weeks. Take out the ski trip, the sports day, the this, the that, probably less than. You don't do anything in about the first 4 or 5 weeks. So you're starting to get a picture of how much these students are doing in a time, plus their external assessments. It's, if you're going to highest end number of tasks, it's a real problem for students. Anyway, that's my bleat on tasks. The types of tasks, the topics, the issues that are covered, but also the length of them, the audience they're for, whether they are, sometimes it is mandated, this needs to be oral, but does an oral need to be that incredibly fearful, stand up in front of the whole class presentation, which for some students is just like death? For many people it is. It's not a comfortable position. Is there any reason why a kid couldn't record their oral on their phone and give it to you as a teacher, and you're listening to it in the car as you drive to work, and that's how you're marking? I mean, it's like there's nothing, it doesn't have to be, instead of 30 students sitting there listening to oral after oral, everyone gets bored, the poor kids at the end of the queue, and students who are just absolutely paralysed. I'd rather fail than have to get up and do that task in front of my peers. So those sorts of ideas. The levels of supervision, is it under test conditions or is it not under test conditions? How can teachers use supervision to support students to actually not just set and forget and say, okay, tell you about this at the start of the term, I'll pick it up at the end of the term, but actually have some check-in points that not only help the teacher to verify that it's the student's work, but help the teacher to monitor that the work's happening along the way. Collaboration, opportunities. Students naturally want to collaborate, but opportunities to work together and learn from each other. The timing of tasks, when and how often tasks are done. Student workload I've talked about. Student readiness. If I doggedly stick to my program when I know the kids actually are undercooked on this particular topic before I give the test or the assignment or whatever that's going to happen, it's a recipe for disaster. Give over a bit more time to the teaching and learning before you actually put the task in. Or does everyone have to do it at the same time? Are they already equally ready? Are some students, they've got it, yep, they're ready to get cracking. These students need a bit more teaching before they're ready to get cracking. Assessment deadlines. There has been a shift over time between whether we, having the same due date for every student at all the time kind of supposes that everyone learns at the same rate. And they don't. And so some flexibility to allow students to be able to move through their work and to help them get it done, but not say, you didn't hand it in Friday by 4 o'clock, that's it, no deal. I mean, I can remember seeing letters of grievances coming into us at the SACE board because English, the old English individual study had to be with the teacher by a certain date at 4 p.m. and we would get, my teacher wouldn't take it at 4:05. Yeah. And you're going, what advantage did that student have in 5 minutes? What advantage really and these were big pieces of work, 2,000 pieces of work, did they even have if they had an hour or two? Come on, it doesn't make any difference, just the whole space. So we've amended our own deadline policy. It used to be, not in zero, and certainly, students do need to do the work, but we're trying to get schools to reframe it as work completion and to think about it as how, as professionals, do you support students to complete the work? Neil, our CE, threw me a good challenge, actually, not long after he'd been there, and it was around this area. And he said, if as teachers, we see evidence of the effectiveness of our teaching through student work, what does it mean if our students don't produce work? What does it mean about our teaching? And I said, oh, bad teacher? He said, it might. I was thinking a bit more. I said, actually, you just don't know. You actually got a void. You don't know anything about your teaching, or you don't know how well you have taught that student and if they've understood what you've taught them, if you've got no evidence of their learning. So I think it's reframing that. And students, by their nature, listening to those students, in the presentation before, they actually want to be successful. No one wants to be the failure at school, but what I don't want to be is humiliated and all those sorts of things. So I'd rather be look like I haven't tried, because if I fail, then that's far worse than not trying in the first place. I'll be naughty, I'll be all those things. So, if we can support students to complete, giving consideration to their family circumstances, giving consideration to the fact that they may be struggling with the work and maybe they need a bit more support. Maybe, and it's even reframing, it's not detention, but it's reframing how you might give students support before or after school, in lunchtimes, to actually get it done. Because for some students, just being left to their own devices is actually problematic. Some students work a lot of hours. For a range of reasons. Some of them are necessary, some of them we might consider unnecessary, they're their choices, but they are becoming young adults. They do have a right to make choices as well. So, we make choices in our lives, so it's about supporting them to be able to make balanced choices and being able to actually get things done. Format of tasks, there are some things that have to be written, but there's a heck of a lot that don't, and certainly as we renew curriculum, there'll be more and more and more. I think for the first time with the new digital technologies curriculum, there's one of the assessments, and it might even be the external actually, it says it should be multimodal. Not that it could be, might be, it's not an option. Actually, this is the preferred way to do this, which kind of makes sense in IT. Why would you do a written report, nothing but that for IT? So it's all digital technology. So it's actually pushing that line now. It's also understanding things like the addendum, of a learning and assessment plan, that you can make changes not just for a class but also for individuals within a class to suit their learning and assessment. And certainly you can also at stage 1 change weightings. So I think the next is a video.
Theberton Senior College is a senior secondary school which has in excess of 1,000 students. We are quite unique in that a lot of our students come through the new arrivals program into the SACE, which means that they're new speakers of English, so they've got a really, really big learning curve. I guess it is unique because we do have such a huge and diverse range of students, but in many ways it's just like any other school. And the reason it's just like every other school is because every single student is an individual. And we believe at Theberton Senior College that everyone has the right to be treated as an individual. So our approach to education and our programming and curriculum development has been all about providing the greatest choice for students and exploring the flexibilities that are offered by the SACE. To that end, we spend a lot of time investigating curriculum options and alternative ways for students to get their SACE. We even build programs around individual students and cohorts of students because it's possible. And so I guess that I see that as one of the great strengths of the college. Because Talissa was very young when she started with us, when she met with teachers and when she met with counsellors to discuss her options, it was highly recommended and recommended by her mother as well that she join the ATAR program because of the fact that it involved a small team of teachers all working together in a very supportive structure to support success. And so Talissa elected to do that. Talissa was very highly motivated, but very early on in the year she came along to school and told us that at the age of 16 she was pregnant and that she was going to have the baby, and that she was determined that she was going to complete her SACE and that she was going to do so to the best of her ability.
I actually skipped year 10 to come here because I was having troubles at my last school and I was ready to drop out and I just didn't want to go to school anymore. And then when I came here, I just changed my attitude and started doing my work. Yeah, so Theberton really helped me with that because I was only 15 when I came here and you meant to be 16. It was just the way the teachers treated you. They treated you more like adults, not as children, and they gave you more respect in the classroom, and I really liked that. Maybe the fact that they emailed you outside of school and it kind of showed that they actually cared about you finishing your subject rather than like not even talking to you. Well, falling pregnant last year, it was very challenging because I was really sick. I was sick for the first 20 weeks of my pregnancy, so I was barely able to come to school. But then the teachers and me emailed outside of school, and so I just passed year 11. And so this year I was ready to complete my year 12 for Sebastian, because I know if I don't do it this year, I probably wouldn't have done it.
We try to develop curriculum that's going to suit specific cohorts of students. For example, we have 2 packages, we call them. One of them is a SACE completion package, which is designed specifically for students who want to complete their SACE. So the students do 3 stage 2 subjects and the research project. We also have another program for students who come in and say they really want to get an ATAR, and it's called the ATAR program. And in this program we integrate 4 SACE stage 2 subjects and the research project. So we develop programs for specific cohorts of students who we believe might have specific needs. These 2 courses in particular are developed for students who require an additional level of support.
The ATAR package where the school picks certain subjects that a whole bunch of students do all together as a class, and then at the end you complete your ATAR. I did health, society and culture, English, IPP and research project. At Theberton it's more like they work with you more. They help you with your work more, and like all the teachers in the ATAR package all help for all the subjects. They don't just individually work with the one subject like at normal schools. Also, it was very hard being pregnant here at this school, and that was with all the support, so it would be, I think, worse than normal school. They got me special provision so I didn't have to do as much assignments. They also helped me excel in my subjects at the start of the year when I was still pregnant, before I had Sebastian. And then when I took the few weeks off after having Sebastian, they still emailed me and told me what was happening in class. They allowed my mum to come to school. Theberton reduced the number of tasks for my ATAR package, so I didn't have to do as much as the rest of the class. They gave me a bit of extensions for some of the subjects if I was falling a bit behind. One of the classes had a holiday group where we come in during the holidays and work on the subjects that we're a bit behind in. Because sometimes I had appointments and stuff, so they would let me leave a bit earlier to go take Sebastian to appointments. For health, my teacher normally let me go home early because it'd be the afternoon lesson. So I'd go home early for appointments and stuff like that. Or if I was just having it, like if Seb was a bit upset, then I'd go home with him because he was crying too much. Theberton has a Moodle, and teachers also emailed you outside of school and during school. That was the class that they gave me special provisions in, so I didn't have to do as much assignments. And yeah, that was the one that also did the holiday workshop.
So the flexibilities that we put in place for Talissa not only involved the flexible option of the ATAR program, but also some flexibility around deadlines, around the assessment plan and around assessment tasks. So in relation to Talissa's time off from school, we provided her with an option of completing her assignments off-site and communicating by email. She used the college Moodle extensively to support her in that process. We used emails and telephone calls to remain connected. Always in the back of our mind was the option that we could use special provisions for Talissa, because if anyone required special provisions, it was Talissa. And we did, I think it was 2 of her subjects, apply for special provisions.
I did achieve my goal by accomplishing high school.
The more we explore the flexibilities offered by the SACE, the more we're going to be able to treat our students as individuals and personalise the learning for them. Differentiating in curriculum and assessment are opportunities that we all have, and obviously a lot of the research shows that putting the student at the centre of the learning is really vital to success. The SACE is a really powerful tool for students to be successful in their lives, and by using the whole range of flexibilities that the SACE offers to students and to schools, we believe that we can develop the strongest educational programs for our students.
We actually want to do a couple of these with flow this year and try and get some flow that works kind of stories where students are successfully completing SACE, because I mean you'd be well aware of the stats out of flow. And it was interesting that wellbeing side, of course, students' wellbeing needs to be attended to. You can't be a learner in the classroom if you've got issues that are outside of school that are impinging on your learning. But once those are attended to, then it's about the learning, and the stats start strong. So we'd like to try and do something similar with flow. Okay. Sort of a bit of a flip, and then I'll try and give this bit. I actually think it's worth having a little bit of discussion towards the end, if we can. So I'm going to try and be a bit quick. But SACE modernisation. So yes, we did make more of the back pages than the front pages with a 10.6 million looks looks fairly small, but for us, this has been 5 years, I think, worth of work to get this 10.6 million to go forward and do what we need to do. I guess it's a bit of a sense of, I might get you to flick to the next slide, about, I love this picture, and for those of you who are, I mean, it's even my age, well, this is my mum's, in fact, this is the year, if my mum hadn't got pregnant with me and not gone to school, like, you know, that sort of stuff, this would have been her year, her leaving year. So, but yeah, it's just fantastic. So kids in Advertiser Lane, this is in January. So they've finished their, you know, exams back in October, November. This is January, all crowded around the paper looking for what's going on. You know, then we look at now, and this is how students, you know, and in fact, probably the better picture would be the kid who's actually in bed on their iPhone. That's actually what most of them are doing it. But it's interesting, you know, because even though the way they're accessing is different, what they're actually getting is the same thing, and the importance of it in those young people's lives hasn't changed. So those are the constants in there. But we do live in a more modern world, and in fact, the exams that, you know, were in the previous, for those students in the previous slide, are the same kinds of exams that students do now, except they're not done at the Wavell Showgrounds. It's about the only change for our senior secondary students. So, and this is the slide I think you were referring to, Laura, before. I mean, yes, you know, there's lots of 21st century learning happening in classrooms. We're using tools that have, come through in the 20th century, but the way that it's actually coming to us for assessment is very much a 17th century format, so this hasn't changed much at all. So we do have a roadmap for modernisation. And what you see is that there's a number of projects we're working on, and and it's not all, you know, everything's going to be changed next year. It's a 5-year plan. There are a number of projects to be done, and they will be simultaneous and concurrent, but phased in as we go. So there's 6 key projects, and I'll just kind of quickly whip you through them so that you've got a bit of a sense of them. The other thing that's really important is is consultation, communication, that whole thing about change management. We can't, we can't do this. The SACE board won't deliver this change. Schools will actually deliver this change. So it needs, especially for how students receive learning and what they do. So it really does rely, for this to happen, on our work with schools, and we need to understand issues of school readiness, all the sorts of IT issues. I think there will be sector and system implications here that will come, and I'm sure there will be clamouring from schools for support at a sector level as well. But having said that, it's probably not any different to the issues they're dealing with online NAPLAN and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. It's coming, so there's no point in us trying to say it's not going to happen. But one of the things that we know is going to be very important is consultation. So one of the projects is subject renewal, sort of ongoing subject renewal, and, you know, in order to retain an engaging, high quality certificate that keeps pace with students, we really need to come back to some first principles about, you know, who are the learners in this subject and what's the important learning. Not should we be doing cells or should we be doing, you know, some other, you know, piece of biology, but actually what are the fundamental concepts that are important here, and therefore what are the range of, you know, learning that students might do that teachers can pick off and say, well, I'm going to do it through cells and somebody else is going to do it through something else. So but the concept may well be something about reproduction or, you know, whatever it is they're doing. Genetics, perhaps. As you can tell, I'm not a biology teacher. So, you know, is the subject intrinsically interesting? Would you want to do it? It's those sorts of, you know, first principle questions. We're currently working on, so the maths, English, science, histories, geography have kind of all been done, but they've been done with the integration of, the mandate at that time was integration of Australian curriculum content, senior secondary Australian curriculum content. And that was this sort of political space about, you know, how, to what extent do you have to integrate, you know, will it all be the same from state to state? And it's not looking like it will be, it won't be vastly different, but it won't be spectacularly similar either. But our board, now that we are past that sort of mandate, is going, we've actually got pretty free rein here to think about what we want learning to look like. And so at the moment, we're looking at information technology, so that's the new digital technologies curriculum that's just been released for consultation now. So if you haven't had a look, go in and do. PE, so I'm working on PE, and that's proving to be an interesting task, and music. And so, yeah, which is, so they're the ones that we're currently working on at the moment. But it's, it is that notion that we want what students are doing for their learning to be worthwhile. We want them to be engaged. We want it to be relevant. We want the curriculum to be innovative and to encourage innovation in students, but innovation in teaching as well. So, because students aren't going to have innovative learning experiences that help them to be innovative if the pedagogy is very, much as it's always been. Diversity of ways students can produce evidence. I'm really trying to look at the issue of workload and start to bring numbers of tasks down, which is good. We do have a draft accreditation schedule, so tiny print. I'll leave slides and things with you anyway. So it is draft because depending on how timelines go, things may change or something might get brought forward earlier. But as you can see, these ones in the sort of light green up the top here are the ones we're currently working on. And I think these are the ones we're supposed to be starting on this term, and we've got 2 weeks left. I think this one might have started, but it's, it is tough and it is tight because you're wanting to involve practitioners from the classroom and also, experts in the field, so from sectors, from universities, from industry. We had a lot of industry involved in the digital technologies curriculum, and trying to get those people together is never an easy call. In terms of professional learning, we want to really look at how professional learning is delivered. We offer a lot of professional learning through the SACE board. It's not our primary remit, so most of it is around SACE curriculum, assessment, etc. But we do have our arm of our Institute of Educational Assessors. We could do planning forums, we do clarifying workshops, we do teachers new to the SACE workshops in partnership with sectors, implementation workshops, and we're trying to look at how we can make all of those things more accessible for teachers. It's interesting because we have clarifying forums, so it's a good one to look at, that Stage 2 teachers come to. So they're in each subject, they're about a half-day PD where they can look at samples of student work and discuss standards with each other, with sort of expert members of the standards leadership team in their subjects, etc. And teachers love them. They say that's fantastic, I get a lot out of it. The feedback's always really good. The only problem is that only about 20% of our teachers attend them. So that's great for that 20%, but what about the other 80%? And interestingly, the people who attend most are often the ones who stand, and they tell us they come, one of the prime reasons they come is to maintain standards. So they're not teachers who are demonstrating a need or a deficit, but they are feeling like that helps them to maintain their standards, which is good. There's nothing, but we're really wanting to look at, how do we support the other something like 6,500 teachers who don't come to be able to access this? And there's a lot of reasons people don't come. They might not be able to book into a workshop at a time that's suitable for them. That's particularly the case for some of our small subjects where there's one forum run. So, if you're a politics teacher or a dance teacher, there's one opportunity, and if for whatever reason you can't come, that's it, you missed it. In bigger subjects we do VC, it's worthwhile, although we tend to find at this stage that really the VC ones are face-to-face workshops delivered via video, which isn't, so they're not designed to be delivered that way, so they're not really engaging professional learning. So surprise, surprise, the uptake's not great, that's realistic. It might be tyranny of distance, that, for a city teacher it's a half a day, for a country teacher it's a day, or for some further away it's 2 days. Sometimes the principal's really happy to let you go, but you know what, we can't get anyone to replace you. So it's just not a possibility for you to go. There's also that pool that teachers have about, their Year 12 lessons. If you've got, an assembly on one day of the week, you've got a swimming carnival that it was another day. I'm not going to go to a clarifying forum in that same week because I've just lost a week of Year 12 lessons doing that, and I can't afford to do that because I've got too much content to get through, or whatever is driving me. So there's a range of reasons. So we really want to start to look at how can we work with, look at an e-platform that becomes a professional learning space for teachers, looking to secure software later this year, but the idea that professional learning for SACE purposes could be undertaken by anyone, anywhere, on any device. The tension that we're hearing from teachers about, they're going, that's kind of good, but their nervousness is at the moment they're often allowed time out to come to clarifying forums. Does that mean I won't get that time anymore? So they certainly, in the work you're doing, they are looking for support from their leaders to say this is actually important time for you, and so how do leaders build that into meeting schedules or acknowledge and actually honour that time and that commitment of those teachers? I think is an important question. But the sorts of learning activities we're talking about are watching or viewing, reading material, making and reviewing assessment decisions, being in online conversations with other teachers, that sort of thing. We're not suggesting this is the end of face-to-face learning opportunities, but we would like to think that we can be more targeted in the face-to-face and actually get instead of needing to deal with everybody coming into us, actually get out to the teachers that actually have quite a demonstrated need that we can see from from data and those sort of things, and work more specifically with those teachers. I don't know if any of you have ever been out to SACE Moderation, but those white bags, I mean, for me, they just make me cringe. When I was a drama teacher, it was the construction of the rehearsal schedule where I knew I was about to lose 8 weeks of my life. There was my weekends. I see the performing arts people in the world understand this. For me, now where I work, it's the white bags. I think we have something like 12,000 of these that come through at the end of the year it's an auditorium full. It's enormous. We're happy to say they'll soon be collector's items. And that we are really now wanting to think, if the students are producing evidence electronically, we should be collecting it electronically. It's interesting, these bags, when I first started, used to be full of lever arch files. It's gradually come down, and often lots of handwritten, all that sort of stuff, down, down, down. Admittedly, we've brought in, word counts and things to limit this, endless amount of work that students do. But they're also, you tend to find there's just a few pieces of paper, the word processed piece of paper, and the only time that word processed piece of paper, word processed task turned into a piece of paper was to go into that bag. It's gone from the student to the teacher, back to the student, feedback, all of those things have happened, and then they print it out and send it to us. But increasingly we get those bags and we open them up and take out a USB. And you think, why is that going through a courier service rather than just coming directly to us electronically? So we're looking to start collecting materials electronically, and in doing that we're sort of starting to think about ways that we might do that. We understand that will be more easily done in some subjects than others. So we want to start to get a bit of a temperature take on which subjects have their evidence that's naturally occurring in electronic forms. So for example, most of the English subjects would fit in that space. Still a lot of essay kind of pieces of work, PowerPoints, oral presentations, they're often done electronically or recorded electronically in some way, shape or form. Whereas there are other subjects, like some subjects that might involve more handwriting, so it might be art pieces that are annotated, so they're a bit more mixed media that are trickier, and some that, like a maths test that's predominantly handwritten. So we think there'll be 3 kind of waves of subjects that we'll work our way through. What we don't want to do is replace teachers packing white bags with teachers standing at photocopiers and scanning stuff and sending it to us. So, there's no win in that for the teacher. It got easier for us, but we don't think modernisation is about making things as cumbersome at the school end, or possibly worse. We're starting to play around with things like how we might collect that information so it's pretty easy for teachers, and we're really sort of trying to work with guiding them with file naming conventions, and as long as they name the files with a pretty standard format of student registration number, subject code and assessment type, they can almost kind of grab a whole lot at once, and it will just go bang, 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 bang and sort them against the students within the application. So they don't even have to go individually drag and drop if they don't want. It will just take the lot. I'm saying that correctly, aren't I, Elaine? You've seen that from your understanding of the developments? Yeah. So they're already looking in that space. I think I might put these two lots of questions together in a minute though, but I think there's a couple of, there are going to be things like issues of school readiness, teacher readiness, student readiness that will need to be addressed, and we know that. Sorry, I'm going... This is old style moderation. This is, some of you may have even been there. Yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure that's English Communications in the River Room down at Underdale, for those of us who remember Underdale campus lovingly. I think that's what it is.
I'd love to know what year that is.
It's 1993. So I know I can't be in it because I was working interstate at that time. So, but I'm going, oh yeah, okay. But I can see people I know. But we still, look, we don't have these big files anymore. We do have some computers on desk to look at electronic work, but it still pretty much looks like that. And yet we really want to move into the space of online marking and online moderation. So when you do that, if we collect the materials online, we can distribute them online. What that means is that allows a greater range of teachers to be involved. It's always harder for a country teacher to be released to be involved, in a smaller school to be released to be involved in moderation than it is a city teacher. It's hard for schools. They might have a great commitment to moderation, but if we're wanting too many of their staff at the same time, they can't manage that, and rightly so. Whereas if we can start to work in ways where it's online, we might, not immediately, but we're wanting to get to the point where we don't need centralised locations, where teachers can do this, like markers do, where they're paid to be able to do the work, and they can do it in more flexible ways and across a longer period of time, instead of this intensive 2 or 3 days or 5 days for moderation where it's just a complete hothouse the whole time. So looking at being more flexible in that way. And the other thing is it provides us with an opportunity to use data and to monitor the progress and the reliability of standards and all those things as we go. And we've figured, and also our markers and moderators spend quite a little, especially the moderators, a lot of time. And by we have sort of protocols. They need to look at the lowest A, lowest B, lowest C, highest D. If there's more than 19 students in the class, they've got to look at more than those 4 initially. They spend all this time working this out. Whereas when we move into an online environment, all of that can be just automated. And what they're concentrating on is standards and student work. And that's all they should be thinking about. That's all we really want them for. One of the things that has sort of, I guess, not popped on the horizon, become a growing awareness for us though, is that the amount of work we collect is quite a lot. We collect about 70% of the materials produced by students. In the vast majority of cases, well in fact overall, not even vast majority, overall we look at about 30% of it. Why do we collect so much? It's because if we need to change results, adjust results, we want to look at more to be sure. And so and because it comes by courier, you want it then to be able to it's got to be available, it's got to be on tap and all this sort of stuff. So we're kind of going, well, hang on, let's have a look what's happened since the new SACE. When we first started the new SACE, there was a lot of nervousness around school assessment having 70% of the grab of the final grade. In all subjects, including a lot of those traditional high-end, your maths, double maths, physics, chem, all of those sorts of subjects, biology, English studies. So there was nervousness around that being 70% school assessment with no kind of statistical overlay, that we would do this by moderation, by teachers viewing work. And so there was, make sure we've got enough we can really interrogate. But and that teachers wouldn't know how to work with performance standards. Even from the very first year, 3/4 of our teachers went bang, and could do it. And that's across the range of subjects. Since that time, that's got better and better and better. So we're collecting all this extra work for the exceptions rather than for the rule. The other thing about the work that we have kind of been lumbered with as part of coming into the new SACE is that to increase public or community confidence, we said, well, the SACE board will choose the sample that comes in for moderation. So teachers will give us the grade, so they've got to put it in at a certain time, then we tell them what the sample is, and then they send us the work. And so that probably is about a week of time that could actually be teaching time, if they could just give us the sample and the grade at the same time. So, we're conscious of that. But the other thing that happens is that we get samples sometimes that aren't great, because we'll get a sample of a student that a teacher's perhaps given a C for, and in fact that student's demonstrated pretty good B grade achievement, but they didn't do a task. So the teacher's then penalised them and given them a C, and which kind of makes sense, like you understand what they're doing, but if you look at it against standards, it doesn't look like a C, it looks like a B, but there's work missing. What are we going to do with that? How do we manage that? Or it's a student who's done, like Talissa, who's legitimately had 1 or 2 tasks reduced from their workload, but there's less tasks for that student. Is that okay? They've done it in a different format. There can be, or work has gone missing. The teacher's had it, the teacher's marked it, they've given it back to the student, it's gone missing, you know? And sometimes, yeah, there's a whole range of reasons. Breaches of rules. It looks really good, but the school's already identified that half of it was plagiarised, and the teacher appropriately has penalised the work. But it looks A grade when I look at it, you know? And so it's messy. So we're moving to a system where we're going to say what we're going to require is that teachers give us all A+ samples, which happens now anyway, that we want just a single sample from each grade level they allocate. So if they don't allocate a B, they don't send us a B. Does that make sense? So just, and where there is more than one sample, so if they had 3 students on B, they choose the one they send us. And they choose us what is a decent representation of their interpretation of the standards, so we don't get the noise. Does that make sense? Because that's what we're trying to moderate, is not the exceptions. We're trying to moderate what the rule is for that teacher, if that makes sense, and they get a handle on their understanding. Now this is interesting, and we kind of knew it would happen. There's schools on one hand are going, yep, makes sense, but every time you talk about this, we did it with SACE coordinators, you let them have a bit of a discussion, and before they'd even talk, share back with the group, I'd say, how many people talked about gaming? And everyone would go, yes, yes, all these teachers are going to play games, they're going to cheat, they're going to, rort the system, they're going to give all of their students A+. Well, we're getting all the A+. Oh, okay, so that doesn't work anymore. What about the class that's got, they've only got B- and they've got 25 of them? Well, it's a possibility, but I've never actually seen one of those. So you get all of this kind of stuff. But there's the sort of the impression about, well, but what if I might give you my best B+ and you might move it to an A-? Yeah, you might, which means it was never a B+, it was an A-, and all the other B+ would move with it, because if you're saying that is what I judge as a B+, you're not right. It's an A-. Does that make sense? So, but I think that somehow they think it's playing a game to give a good representation, and go, that's what I actually want, is a good representation. Or what about if you do it all the way up the line, and I might tell the students that this student, I was thinking, do I give them a C- or a C? Well, I'll give them the C-, because somehow it's sort of, if my grades get moved up, then I feel better as a teacher. But, you go, okay, that happens all the way up the line. You go, you know what it says? You were wrong. You didn't know the standard. That's what it says. It doesn't say you're a good assessor. It says you were bloody wrong. And so, and I think, we talked with SACE coordinators and said, that's how we need them to talk in schools, because this is exactly the conversation they're going to get. And I suspect that you'll get when you go out. And every teacher will say to you, I wouldn't do it, but what about others? And I keep saying, well, hang on, if we've got all the I wouldn't do it's in a room, and we've got all the I wouldn't do it's in the schools, we haven't got a problem. And it's actually trust in professional judgment, that teachers are moral people, that they have a professional code of practice that they work to. You have to look the student in the eye, and if I've given you two the same grade all year and put you in at different grades at the end of the year, how can I possibly defend that to you? How can, that doesn't work. So I honestly don't believe that teachers behave in that way.
And you've actually been doing that for stage 1 with maths and English.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece is, at the moment, we're very public about what it is we look at, your lowest A, lowest B, all that sort of stuff. And you think, okay, so if teachers were doing that now, what we'd see is 1 A- and 5 A's, 1 B- and 5 B's, because you'd stack them all in there and you'd leave one poor bunny sitting as the B-, and we're only going to look at that. Do you know what I mean? And we don't see that in the data. It doesn't look like that. It actually looks like you would expect it to look. It's distributions are, reasonable in classes, or they will be, bunched in some classes. You look at the work and go, yeah, that makes sense. They are bunched. That's what you've got. You've only got this limited range. We just don't see it. So, We think it's not as much of a... Is it a possibility? Yes, it is. Of course it is. But we actually would prefer to take the positive, approach, and that trust in teachers, and we think that the benefits far outweigh those risks. And, in the end too, principals manage the integrity of the assessment practices in their school, and So I think, these are the kinds of things I think that you're going to get some questions about.
I've heard some of this at the SACE Leaders Forum, and it's funny because I was sitting with SACE coordinators and lots of those comments were being passed around the table, we could play the game this way, play the game, and that's exactly what they say, play the game. So we know that some of those concerns are going to be raised. But I think the most important point you make, Cathy, is that idea of flexibility, not just in how we deliver the SACE, but that flexibility of thinking. And I think the people who are working with STEM work sites, they're finding that at the moment. It's all about flexibility of thinking and what you can do with this new resource, not just while it's being built, but for the years after, and how we can do things differently to improve the innovation and the learning of kids. And I think that's the major challenge. And one of the things that came up at the SACE Leaders Forums was, well, if work is going to be submitted online and exams will eventually be on screen, we're starting from scratch, which is really exciting. If you're throwing out your physics paper exam in 3 years' time, and it can be anything online with simulations.
You're too hopeful. You're too hopeful.
Oh, sorry.
Physics is the last bastion, be very careful.
It can be multimodal, etc. What skills do the kids need in years 8 through
Absolutely.
to 11 so that they can cope with that type of thing when it gets to the exam time? That's really exciting. And that's where the flexibility of thinking comes in, and when we're dealing with our leaders in schools and getting them to look at things flexibly. And we kind of started, it was interesting when we looked at that data about the failing grades at stage 1 and stage 2. That forced us to think a bit more flexibly, might not just, maybe maths by itself isn't that exciting. Maybe we have to think more flexibly.
Be careful.
It raises those questions of looking at those data sets in a different way. Looking at completion rates isn't going to do it. That's not flexible. It's the stories behind that.
That's
what
right.
we can do differently.
Yeah.
And I think that will be our challenge in terms of some of the SACE modernisation things as well. And I was just sitting there, I don't know why I didn't think of this at the SACE Leaders Forum, but if they are submitting online, there might be some wonderful trends that we can look at in data in terms of the format that kids are submitted work. There's opportunity to do that, which we've never had before.
That's right, to be able to track that in meaningful ways.
Lots of different things for us to consider.
And that will give interesting data sets, won't it? Because you've got schools where they're either doing very well or doing, or the students don't seem to be doing as well as you would expect. Is there something in the type of assessments, the format, the diversity of assessments that they're actually, are coming through for students that might be contributing?
I was just going to say, I actually think submitting online, you're actually going to get more diversity of assessments, because one of the things that is an issue is when you have to save the file and burn it and make sure it's, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that actually holds you back sometimes from doing a whole class, but you'll do for 1 or 2 students. But
there's a few things in there, aren't there? There's the workload for the teacher.
Yes.
The other thing is, and that we're just having a couple of big conversations this week, we have to be so ready to be receptive to what evidence looks like in other forms, because it's a bit of a bugbear of mine where I'm going, we're trying sometimes things like substantiation in the research project, we will overlay the conventions of a written essay, like in-text referencing and that sort of thing, on a film version. And you're going, why are we asking for, so it's, it's helping teachers, but it's helping our markers and our moderators too, really at education of our senior secondary community about being able to view evidence and being able to say that maybe, a student in an essay might give a justification, a written justification, but you know what, if I make a statement in a film and I put an image with it that's incredibly powerful and a sound or whatever that, you know what it's like when you see it and you just go, wow, it just hits you. Did that kid need to say, I chose that image because because I go, you've just shown me that all came together, you know. That's not synthesis, what is, you know. So it's, I think there's that kind of stuff we've got to be able to work with as well.
And especially working with the kids as a research project teacher myself, the number of kids that say, I will present it this way because I'm going to get better marks and it's safer, and trying to break that perception. I've had parents ring up and say, no, they're doing an essay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just as
I'll come to yours in a second.
You know, the innovative teachers are going to have the upper hand in this game, as probably they always do. You know, the current model, because it's so old, kind of gives us a real low common denominator. You know, generally, I'm generalising like crazy here, but you know, the 17th century format we talked about has been around so long, we're going, as long as our kids can do that.
If I can teach academic writing, my kids are going to do really well.
Everybody's kind of playing the same field. We open up this game, then the capacity difference across our teaching force is going to be greatly widened. So tail wagging the dog, we've got a big responsibility to make sure that all of our staff understand the possibilities and can see a pathway to themselves, enabling the kids doing that. Otherwise, we will have the leafy greens who can put money and effort into that, far outweighing our schools that can't do that.
No, sorry, you had a question
I
here.
was just wondering about a lot of very far regional schools that have poor or almost limited internet access. What strategies?
Well, that is the stuff that is going to come up. You know, it certainly will come up. It's got to be obviously part of our consultation. We're just about to. We are literally, as in, probably. I don't think it's gone out today. I think it'll go out early next week, Monday or Tuesday. A survey to all SACE teachers, and really pretty basic survey in some ways, but saying, how do the kids submit evidence to you? How do you? How do they produce the evidence? How do they submit it to you? Because some teachers will still ask for a printed version even though the student word processed it or whatever, or they don't want the PowerPoint, they want the printout of the PowerPoint. That's that kind of stuff. So, and then how do you submit it to the SACE board? And then a few other things about things like, so what would support you? What would you need to be able to work in more electronic ways with students? And to try and get a temperature take on what scale of variability we've got, but also as part of it we're wanting to be able to feed that back into principals to disaggregate the data to say here's what the picture looks like for your school as well, so that if they've got pockets that they need to work with more actively in terms of practice to have those teachers ready, they've also got that opportunity. So it will be infrastructure things, but it will also be those pedagogical differences, and certainly I know that our CE has been talking with your CE and the Catholics etc, because it's not, we don't provide any of those things to schools, so we can make all the bells and whistles in the world, but if schools can't get it to us, it's a problem. So it won't be an overnight. It won't. By the end of next year, we want to be able to mark and what we said is we'll mark and moderate at least one subject online. So, but that's as far as we're kind of committing to. We're actually hopeful we're doing a lot more than that, because once you can do one, you can do more. But we're kind of not making any public commitment beyond that at this stage.
And that's kind of the logistics, but the planning around the pedagogy and working with schools, that starts now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And that's what we've got to work on, and what Cathy and I will work on together in terms of doing some planning about what we can collaborate on and help with our leaders. So thank you very much for today, Cathy. I think that has enlightened some people what the SACE modernisation is and what it might mean for our work, which is great. And the flexibilities that really carried on well from the first session in terms of what's possible. So thank you.
That's right. And I would very much like to get like your team and my together to look at school improvement, common issues, or it might even be focusing in on particular schools that we can. We have different remits. We really try and stay out of that pedagogical space. There's a whole lot of other remit that you have that we don't have, and we can talk about SACE flexibilities and add some of those things into the mix. But there's a whole lot of, you have data about attendance and and enrolment that we just have no sight of. You have data from year 8 to year 12, so there's a lot of other pieces in there that you're working in as well.
So I will put out those guiding questions again, and probably a few extra ones after our discussion today. And if you feed that back to me when Cathy and I meet on the 4th of October, we'll do a debrief after this and perhaps start looking at a joint planning day or half a day and getting the two teams together.